Garrett Sullivan stood in the cramped office above his garage, staring at the simple gold band on his left hand. 4 years, 48 months since Natalie's last breath in that sterile hospice room. The ring had become part of him, like a scar that never quite healed. Outside, the December wind rattled the windows of the West Loop building that had been in his family since his father first turned a wrench here in 1987. Tonight, he was supposed to do something he'd sworn he'd never do again: go on a date. The garage below smelled like motor oil and Christmas cookies, an odd combination that somehow worked. Harper, his 6-year-old daughter, sat cross-legged on the concrete floor, her small hands gripping a toy wrench as she practiced changing the tire on her doll's miniature car. Her dark curls bounced as she worked, tongue poking out in concentration. She had Natalie's eyes, that same bright intensity that could see through any excuse. Gray's phone buzzed on the workbench. Marlowe's face filled the screen, his older sister's expression already loaded with determination before he even answered. "You're not backing out." It wasn't a question. He wiped his hands on a rag that had seen better days, leaving dark streaks across the faded cotton. "I don't think this is a good idea, Marlo. It's been 4 years. I know. Harper needs to see you happy. Actually happy, not the fake smile you give everyone else." The accusation landed with surgical precision. Gray looked down at his daughter, who had paused her work to watch him with those knowing eyes. Kids always knew. They sensed the empty spaces adults tried to hide. Harper stood up, marching over with her hands planted on her hips, a perfect imitation of her aunt's stance. "Daddy promised Aunt Marlo. Sullivans don't break promises." The words echoed something his father used to say. Gray felt the weight of 3 generations pressing down on his shoulders. He glanced at the wall where photos hung in mismatched frames. His grandfather in grease-stained overalls, his father beneath the hood of a '67 Mustang, Natalie holding Harper as an infant standing in front of the garage's hand-painted sign. "All right, one date. When this crashes and burns, I'm blaming both of you." Marlowe's laugh crackled through the speaker. "Deal. Be there by 7. Don't overthink it." The call ended. Harper tugged at his sleeve. "Daddy needs to wear the nice shirt, the blue one Aunt Marlo bought." Gray looked down at his work clothes, oil stains decorating the fabric like abstract art. The blue shirt hung in his closet upstairs, tags still attached. He'd bought it for Natalie's funeral and never worn it since. Harper vanished up the stairs, returning moments later with a small envelope clutched in her hands. Her face had shifted from playful to serious. "Daddy, what's this?" The letterhead made his stomach tighten. Blackwell and Comedy Fashion House, LLC. The third notice in as many weeks. He took the envelope, scanning the formal language that boiled down to one simple message. They wanted to buy his building. Wanted to tear down Sullivan's auto repair and put up something glossy and expensive in its place. "It's just some people who want to buy our home, sweetheart. But we're not selling. Daddy promised Mom we'd keep this place." Harper nodded, satisfied with the answer in the way only children could be. She didn't understand the economics, the pressure. The phone calls from lawyers speaking in tones that implied his resistance was merely a temporary inconvenience. At 6, she only knew this was home. The place where she'd taken her first steps, where Natalie had taught her to draw fashion sketches on receipt paper during slow afternoons. Gray shoved the envelope into a drawer already stuffed with similar letters. He'd deal with it later. Right now, he had to transform from a mechanic into someone who looked like he belonged at the gauge. Across the city, 22 floors above Michigan Avenue, Alexandra Blackwell stood before floor-to-ceiling windows, watching Chicago's lights flicker to life against the December darkness. Her reflection stared back, sharp and unforgiving. Black suit, blonde hair pulled into a tight bun, makeup applied with military precision. She looked successful, felt hollow. Her desk was a battlefield of financial reports, each one screaming the same truth in different numbers. Blackwell and Company Fashion House was dying. Not quickly, not dramatically, but with the slow certainty of a ship taking on water. Revenue down 15% year over year. Inventory bloated. The spring line had flopped with critics, and the investors, those faceless entities who'd bet millions on her vision, were getting restless. The email sat open on her laptop, subject line bolded in a way that felt accusatory. Final board meeting, December 11th. Cameron Pierce, her CFO, had written it with his typical bluntness. 4 months to expand or they'd pull all funding. $15 million would evaporate. 180 employees would lose their jobs. The company she'd built from a $50,000 bank loan and a studio apartment full of fabric samples would become another cautionary tale about ambition outpacing capability. Lexi's phone lit up with a notification she immediately wanted to ignore. The dating app Sienna had installed during a girls' night when wine had loosened Lexi's usual defenses. New match. GS Single Dad, works with hands, not great at talking. The profile picture showed a man in a garage, face partially obscured by the hood of a car. She couldn't even tell if he was attractive, just that he looked real in a way the usual matches didn't. The office door swung open without a knock. Sienna entered like she owned the place, which technically she didn't, but 15 years of friendship had erased most boundaries. "You're actually considering canceling." Lexi didn't bother denying it. "I have a company to save. 180 people depend on me making the right decision about the West Loop property. I don't have time for awkward small talk with a stranger." Sienna dropped into the chair opposite Lexi's desk, crossing her legs with deliberate casualness. "That's exactly why you need this. 3 years, Lexi. 3 years since you've gone on a single date. You're turning into one of those CEOs who dies at their desk and nobody notices for a week." The image was uncomfortably accurate. Lexi had spent last Christmas in this office, answering emails while the city partied below. She'd told herself it was necessary, that sacrifice was the price of success. But late at night, when the building was empty and the only sound was the hum of the heating system, she'd felt the weight of that choice pressing against her chest. One date. If it's terrible, you come back here and work. If it's not, maybe you remember what it feels like to be human. Lexi pulled up the property file on her screen, needing something concrete to focus on. West Loop Development Project, Phase 1. The address sat highlighted in red, 1847 W. Roosevelt Road, a mixed-use block with 3 businesses they'd need to relocate. Angelo's Pizzeria had already agreed to move with a generous compensation package. Prestige Dry Cleaners was negotiating. Sullivan's Auto Repair hadn't responded to any of their letters. "The guy I'm supposed to meet lives in West Loop, near the property we need." Sienna leaned forward. "What are the odds? Maybe the universe is telling you something." Lexi didn't believe in the universe sending messages. She believed in spreadsheets and market analysis and making decisions based on data, not feelings. But something about the coincidence felt significant, even if she couldn't articulate why. "Fine, 1 date, 2 hours. Then I'm coming back here to figure out how to save everything." The Gauge was the kind of restaurant that tried too hard to be casually elegant. Exposed brick, Edison bulbs, servers who memorized your name after hearing it once. Gray arrived at 7:15, already regretting the tight collar of his shirt and the way his only pair of dress shoes pinched his feet. He'd parked his beat-up Ford pickup 3 blocks away, not wanting his date to see it and immediately lower her expectations. The hostess greeted him with professional warmth. "Sullivan party?" He nodded, feeling oddly exposed. She led him to a booth in the corner, explaining his date hadn't arrived yet. He sat, hands folded on the table, trying to remember the last time he'd done this. Probably 2008, that first date with Natalie at the diner near Northwestern. She'd ordered pancakes at 7 p.m., and he'd known immediately she was different. The memory brought its usual ache. He touched his wedding ring, spinning it once around his finger. At 7:18, Gray's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The woman from the app, probably, telling him she was running late. He started to type a response when the restaurant door opened and someone rushed in, shaking snow from a designer coat that probably cost more than his monthly mortgage. She was beautiful in an intimidating way. Blonde hair, sharp features, the kind of woman who looked like she belonged in a boardroom or a magazine spread. She spoke rapidly to the hostess, gesturing with manicured hands. He caught fragments of the conversation. Car trouble, dead battery, waiting for roadside assistance. Gray's mechanic instincts kicked in before his brain caught up. He stood, approaching the hostess stand. "Excuse me, I couldn't help overhearing. I'm a mechanic. If it's something simple, I might be able to help." The woman turned, and up close she was even more striking. Blue eyes assessed him with the speed of someone used to making snap judgments. "That's kind, but I've already called Tape AA. They said 90 minutes. Gray glanced at his watch. 7:20. His date was officially late. Maybe this was the universe's way of giving him an out. "I have some time. Let me at least take a look. If it's the alternator, I can patch it enough to get you where you're going." She hesitated, clearly weighing the risks of accepting help from a stranger against the reality of sitting in a broken car for an hour and a half. "Okay. Thank you. I'm parked on Wabash, about 3 blocks south." They walked in awkward silence, snow falling in thick flakes that caught in her hair. She moved carefully in heels that were designed for aesthetics, not Chicago winter. Gray had his toolkit in the truck, always prepared for roadside emergencies. It was how his father had taught him. A mechanic without tools is just a guy with opinions. The Mercedes sat dark and defeated, hazard lights blinking weakly. Gray popped the hood, pulled out his keychain flashlight, and began the diagnostic dance he'd performed thousands of times. Battery terminals clean. Belt tension good. He connected his multimeter to the alternator and watched the reading drop to 10.5 volts. "Alternator's dead. Battery isn't getting charged. I can bypass it temporarily, get you to where you're headed, but you'll need a proper fix within 24 hours. She was watching him work with an expression he couldn't quite read, curiosity mixed with something else. "Where are you going?" "The Gauge. Michigan Avenue." Gray laughed, the sound surprising both of them. "No kidding. That's where I'm supposed to be." Blind date. Her face shifted through several emotions in quick succession. Surprise, realization, embarrassment. "You're GS. You're the match. Alexandra?" "Lexi. Most people call me Lexi." They stood in the falling snow, the absurdity of the situation breaking through their respective walls. Gray felt something loosen in his chest, a pressure he hadn't realized he was carrying. "Guess we should start over. I'm Garrett Sullivan. Call me Gray. I fix cars and apparently rescue blind dates before I know they're blind dates." She smiled, and it transformed her face from intimidating to approachable. "Alexandra Blackwell. I run a fashion company and make terrible decisions about car maintenance." The alternator patch took 15 minutes. Gray worked efficiently, explaining what he was doing as he went. She asked intelligent questions, not pretending to understand more than she did, but clearly trying to learn. It reminded him of Harper, that same genuine curiosity about how things worked. "You said you have a daughter." Gray tightened a connection, wiped his hands on a rag. "Harper, she's 6. Obsessed with fashion. Draws dresses on everything, including my invoices. I don't understand half of what she's talking about when she explains hemlines and silhouettes." "I might. Fashion's kind of my whole life." They drove separately to the Gauge, arriving at 7:45. The hostess did an admirable job hiding her confusion when both the Sullivan and Blackwell parties turned out to be the same two people. The booth felt different now, loaded with the knowledge of how they'd met. Gray ordered coffee, needing something to do with his hands. Lexi did the same. The menu sat unopened between them. "So," Lexi began, "scale of 1 to 10, how weird is this?" "Solid 8, maybe 9. I was going to cancel. Spent the last hour convincing myself I was too busy, that my company needs me more than I need a social life." Gray recognized that impulse, the way grief and responsibility could become indistinguishable from each other. "My sister had to practically threaten me to show up. I haven't done this since my wife died. 4 years ago." The words hung between them. Lexi didn't offer the usual platitudes. She just nodded, understanding that some things didn't need commentary. The conversation flowed easier after that. Gray told her about inheriting the garage at 17 when his father's heart gave out during an oil change. How he'd planned to study engineering at Northwestern but stayed to keep the business alive. How every transmission he rebuilt felt like honoring something bigger than himself. Lexi talked about her mother, an artist who'd given up painting to support Lexi's father's finance career. How she'd died when Lexi was 14, leaving behind sketchbooks full of unrealized dreams. How Lexi had chosen fashion over her father's wishes, borrowed $50,000 from a bank that barely believed in her, and spent 3 years designing in a studio apartment before selling her first 100 pieces. Do you regret it? Staying instead of going to college? Gray thought about the question, really thought, instead of giving the easy answer. "I used to. Thought I'd missed out on some other version of my life. But you learn more from real problems than theoretical ones. Every engine is a puzzle. Every customer teaches you something about people." He paused, tracing the rim of his coffee cup. "My father used to say you can either be rich or sleep at night. Can't do both. I chose sleep." The line landed with weight. Lexi set down her cup. "That's the most honest thing anyone's said to me in years. Everyone in my world is chasing both and losing sleep anyway. What about you? Do you sleep?" "Not really. Company's struggling. We need to expand or lose our funding. Found a property in West Loop that's perfect, but it's complicated." Gray felt something shift in his chest. West Loop. The letters in his drawer. What part of West Loop? "Roosevelt Road, around the 1800 block. There are some small businesses we'd need to relocate, but the location is ideal for a flagship store." The numbers connected in his head with sickening clarity. His garage was in the 1800 block of Roosevelt. Blackwell and Comey Fashion House. The letters he'd been ignoring. What kind of businesses? A pizzeria, a dry cleaner, an auto repair shop. The owners have been resistant. Gray's phone buzzed. A text from Marlo. "How's it going? She nice?" He stared at the screen, paralyzed by the impossibility of the situation. The woman sitting across from him, the one who'd made him laugh for the first time in months, who'd asked about his daughter with genuine interest, was the same person trying to take everything he'd promised Natalie to protect. "Gray? You okay?" He looked up, schooling his expression into something neutral. "Yeah, just my sister checking in." But his body language had changed, and Lexi noticed. The ease between them fractured slightly, replaced by a tension he couldn't explain without revealing what he'd just realized. They finished dinner making careful small talk, both of them dancing around something neither wanted to name. When the check came, Gray grabbed it before Lexi could protest. "I can pay my half." "I know you can, but I fixed your car and this seems like a fair trade." Outside, the snow had intensified. Lexi's car sat under a growing white blanket. "That alternator won't last much longer. I can fix it properly tomorrow. Garage is closed Sundays, but I'll be there doing paperwork anyway." Lexi hesitated, and he could see her weighing whether this was a good idea. "I don't want to ruin your Sunday." "Harper will have me up at 5 opening Christmas presents." An hour in the garage will be a nice break. The words came out before he'd thought them through. Could I meet her? Harper? Gray studied Lexi's face, looking for signs this was politeness rather than genuine interest. You want to meet my 6-year-old daughter? You said she's into fashion. That's literally my job. And I'd like to see you again. The honesty disarmed him. Gray felt the competing impulses of attraction and suspicion, wanting to trust while knowing what he knew. Tomorrow. 2 p.m. They exchanged numbers, real ones this time, not app-mediated connections. Gray watched her drive away, tail lights disappearing into the snow. Then he pulled out his phone and searched for the address of Sullivan's Auto Repair, 1847. Due, Roosevelt Road, the same property Blackwell and Company wanted to buy. Harper was asleep when he got home, sprawled across her bed with drawings scattered around her. Gray picked them up carefully, studying each one. Dresses with elaborate trains, coats with impossible collars, a child's imagination unconstrained by reality. On his dresser sat the photo from his wedding day. Natalie in a simple white dress, him in a borrowed suit, both of them grinning like idiots outside the courthouse. She'd made him promise to keep the garage, to honor what his father had built, to create something Harper could inherit. I don't know what to do, Nat. She's the buyer, the one trying to take this place. But she doesn't know I'm the holdout, and I can't tell her without destroying whatever this is. The photo offered no answers. Gray lay down on top of the covers, still dressed, and stared at the ceiling until exhaustion dragged him under. Sunday morning arrived with Harper's predictable enthusiasm. She bounced on his bed at 5:17, announcing Santa had come even though Christmas was still 2 weeks away. Gray stumbled downstairs, making coffee while she tore through the single present Marlowe had left yesterday. A book about fashion designers through history. At 1:45, Gray showered and changed into clean jeans and a flannel shirt. Harper insisted on wearing her favorite dress, the purple one with lace trim that Natalie had made 2 months before the diagnosis. Is the lady coming to see us? Her name is Lexi, and yes, she's coming to fix my car and meet you. Harper's eyes went wide. The pretty lady from the restaurant? How do you know she's pretty? You smell like cologne, Daddy. You only wear cologne for pretty ladies. Gray laughed despite himself. His daughter was too perceptive by half. The doorbell rang at exactly 2. Harper raced to answer it before Gray could stop her. Lexi stood on the landing, holding a bag from an expensive art supply store and looking nervous in a way she hadn't last night. Harper stared, then turned to Gray. Daddy, there's a princess at our door. Lexi knelt down, getting eye level with Harper. Not a princess, sweetie. Just Lexi. Your dad told me you like fashion. Harper grabbed Lexi's hand, dragging her inside with 6-year-old enthusiasm. You have to see my drawings. I made so many. Do you really make clothes? Like real clothes people wear? Gray watched Lexi settle onto the floor of their cramped living room, her designer jeans probably worth more than his monthly utility bill, looking completely comfortable surrounded by Harper's scattered artwork. She examined each drawing with genuine attention, asking questions about fabric choices and construction techniques that went over Harper's head but thrilled her anyway. You have real talent. Not everyone understands proportion at your age. Harper beamed, then her face grew serious. Mommy taught me. Before she went to heaven. The room went quiet. Lexi didn't flinch from the statement. Your mommy was a good teacher. You're making her proud. Gray felt something crack open in his chest, some sealed compartment he'd been protecting since Natalie died. Harper launched into an explanation of draping techniques she'd learned from YouTube videos, pulling a bedsheet off the couch to demonstrate. Lexi followed along, offering suggestions and corrections with the patience of someone who actually enjoyed teaching. An hour disappeared. Gray stood in the kitchen doorway, watching two people who shouldn't fit together finding common ground. Harper sat in Lexi's lap, both of them working on pinning fabric to a dress form Harper had made from wire hangers and duct tape. Then Harper said it, casual and devastating in the way only children could be. "Daddy's worried about the garage." Lexi's hands stilled. "Why's that, honey?" "Some company wants to buy our building. Daddy says we have to move." Gray saw the exact moment Lexi understood. Her face went pale, hands frozen on the fabric. She looked up at him with an expression of dawning horror. "Gray." Harper, oblivious to the tension, kept talking. "We live on Roosevelt Road, Sullivan's Auto Repair, the building downstairs." Lexi stood abruptly, nearly knocking Harper over. "I need to use the bathroom." She disappeared down the hall. Gray heard the lock click, then silence. Harper looked confused. "Did I say something wrong?" "No, sweetheart. Grown-ups just have complicated things sometimes." 5 minutes passed, then 10. Gray knocked softly on the bathroom door. "Lexi?" Her voice came through muffled. "I need a minute." He leaned against the wall, sliding down to sit on the floor. Through the door he could hear her breathing, sharp and controlled like someone fighting panic. "You didn't know it was my garage until Harper said something." A long pause. "No, I swear I didn't. But you know now." "Yes." Another silence, heavier than the first. "What happens now, Lexi?" The lock clicked open. She emerged, face streaked with mascara she'd tried and failed to wipe away. "I don't know. My company needs that property. We've spent 6 months looking at alternatives. Everything else failed. The board votes tomorrow morning on whether to proceed with the acquisition. 180 jobs are on the line." Gray stood, maintaining careful distance. "And this garage is everything my wife asked me to protect. It's Harper's inheritance, her connection to her mother's dreams." They stared at each other across 3 feet of hallway, the impossibility of the situation crystallizing between them. "I should go." Lexi moved past him, grabbing her coat. Harper appeared from the living room. "You're leaving? But we were having fun." Lexi knelt down one more time, hugging Harper tight. "You're the most talented little designer I've ever met. Keep drawing, okay?" Then she was gone, door closing behind her with careful quiet. Harper looked up at Gray. "I don't understand. Did I make her sad?" Gray picked up his daughter, holding her close. "No, baby. Sometimes grown-up problems are just really complicated." Lexi made it 2 blocks before she had to pull over, her hands shaking too hard to drive. She called Cameron Pierce, not caring that it was Sunday afternoon. "We can't buy the Roosevelt property." Pierce's voice came through sharp with confusion. "What?" "Lexi, we've been over this. There are no alternatives. The owner is someone I know." "How well could you possibly know him?" "We filed the intent to purchase 3 weeks ago. I met him Friday night. Had dinner with him. Spent this afternoon with his daughter." The silence on the other end lasted too long. "You're tanking our company for a guy you've known 48 hours? He's a single father. That garage is his late wife's legacy. I can't just destroy it because it's convenient for us." "What about our 180 employees, their families, the investors who trusted us? You're willing to let all of that collapse because you have feelings for some mechanic?" Lexi didn't have an answer that made sense even to herself. "Board meets tomorrow at 9. You need to be there with a clear head and a business-first mindset. I'm sorry about the personal situation, but this is bigger than one man's garage." The call ended. Lexi drove home on autopilot, her mind cycling through impossible scenarios. She could find another property, but they'd already exhausted every viable option. She could try to negotiate with Gray, but what could she possibly offer that would make him give up his wife's memory? She could walk away from everything she'd built, but that would mean 180 people losing their jobs because she'd developed feelings for someone she barely knew. At home, she pulled up the acquisition file, staring at the property photos. Sullivan's Auto Repair looked exactly like what it was, a small family-owned business that had somehow survived in a neighborhood transforming around it. The building was old but maintained, the kind of place that probably had regulars who'd been coming for decades. Her phone buzzed with a text from Gray. "Hey, hope everything's okay. Harper had a great time." She stared at the message, wanting to respond but having no idea what to say. Another text came through a minute later. "I know this is complicated, but I'd like to see you again. Figure out if there's a way through this that doesn't require either of us to sacrifice everything." Lexi typed and deleted 5 different responses before settling on, "I need some time to think. I'm sorry." Monday morning arrived cold and bright. Gray opened the garage at 6, needing something physical to do while his mind raced. He had 3 cars scheduled for service, routine maintenance that required minimal thought. His hands moved through familiar patterns while his brain tried to solve an unsolvable problem. At 8:30, a courier arrived with a registered letter. Gray signed for it, already knowing what it would say. Notice of intent to purchase. Blackwell & Company Fashion House LLC wishes to acquire the property located at 1847 W. Roosevelt Road. Market value assessed at $850,000. Terms negotiable. Please contact legal representation at your earliest convenience. He pulled out his phone, searching for Alexandra Blackwell, CEO. The results came back immediately. Dozens of articles about her meteoric rise in fashion, photos from industry events, always looking polished and unattainable. An interview from last year where she talked about building her company from nothing, proving her father wrong, creating opportunities for other women in a male-dominated industry. The woman in those articles seemed different from the person who'd sat on his living room floor teaching Harper about draping techniques. But they were the same person, and that person was about to destroy everything he'd promised to protect. His phone rang. Unknown number. "Mr. Sullivan, this is Marcus Thornton with Westfield Development Group. We understand Blackwell & Company has made you an offer for your property. We'd like to make a counteroffer, $1.2 million, all cash, close in 30 days. Gray's mind stuttered over the number, almost $500,000 more than Blackwell was offering. "What would you do with the property?" "Luxury condos, 8 units, price point starting at $750 per. The neighborhood's transforming. Your location is prime. And my garage? Would need to be demolished to make room for the new construction. But with our offer, you could relocate anywhere in the city, open a larger facility, hire staff, expand services." Gray looked around the garage. Oil stains on concrete his father had poured, the hydraulic lift Natalie had surprised him with on their 5th anniversary, the corner where Harper had taken her first steps while he was changing someone's brake pads. "I need to think about it." "Of course, you have our number, but Mr. Sullivan, this is a one-time offer. Market's hot right now, but that won't last forever." The call ended. Gray sat on his rolling stool, surrounded by tools and memories, holding a letter from a woman he was falling for, and a phone number from a developer offering him financial security. Natalie's voice echoed in his head, words she'd said 2 weeks before she died. "Promise me you'll keep the garage alive. Not just because it's ours, but because Dad built something that mattered. Communities need places like this, people who fix things instead of replacing them." He'd promised, sworn on everything that mattered. But Natalie had also said something else, quieter and harder to remember. "Promise me you'll live, really live. Find happiness again. Don't make this garage a shrine to me." Gray pulled out his phone, typing a message to Lexi before he could overthink it. "The situation's more complicated than either of us knew. But I'm not ready to give up on whatever this might be." "Are you?" He hit send, then immediately regretted it. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, Board meeting in 30 minutes. I don't know what I'm going to say, but I'm not giving up either. The board meeting started at 9 sharp. Lexi sat at the head of the conference table, surrounded by faces that held her entire future in their expressions. Cameron Pierce to her right, already projecting the acquisition proposal onto the wall screen. Lisa Park, the COO, reviewing printed materials with the focus of someone preparing for battle. 3 board members whose names carried weight in Chicago business circles. And on video call from San Francisco, the face she'd been dreading most, Richard Blackwell, her father. Pierce stood, advancing the first slide. Property photos of Roosevelt Road filled the screen. The situation is straightforward. West Loop location, 12,000 square feet once we consolidate the existing structures. 3 businesses need relocation. Angelo's Pizzeria accepted our package last week. Prestige Dry Cleaners is 90% through negotiations. Sullivan's Auto Repair is the final holdout. Board member Patricia Henshaw, 60-something and sharp as cut glass, leaned forward. "What's the delay with the auto repair?" Pierce glanced at Lexi before continuing. "The owner has emotional attachment. Late wife's legacy. Standard holdout psychology. Legal is prepared to proceed with eminent domain if necessary, though it would add 6 weeks to the timeline." Lexi's coffee turned acidic in her stomach. Eminent domain. Taking Gray's garage by force because he refused to surrender what his dying wife had asked him to protect. Richard Blackwell's voice cut through the speaker. "Victoria, you've been quiet. This is your project. What's your recommendation?" She hated when he used her full name. A reminder that she'd never quite escaped being his daughter, even after building this company entirely separate from his empire. "I need more time to explore alternatives." The room went still. Pierce's expression shifted to something between confusion and alarm. "Lexi, we've been over this. 6 months of research. 12 failed locations. This is our only viable option within budget and timeline. There has to be something we missed. Another property, a different approach to the existing location, some creative solution we haven't considered." Patricia removed her reading glasses, studying Lexi with uncomfortable intensity. "This hesitation wouldn't have anything to do with personal involvement, would it?" The question landed like an accusation. Lexi felt every eye in the room lock onto her face. "I met the property owner. Socially. I didn't know the connection until after." Richard's face on the screen grew hard. "How well do you know him?" "We had dinner. I spent time with his daughter. He's a good person trying to honor a promise he made to his dying wife. Taking his garage feels wrong." Pierce's voice rose slightly, controlled anger bleeding through professional veneer. "What about the 180 people who work for us? What about their families, their mortgages, their kids' college funds? You're willing to sacrifice all of them because you have feelings for some mechanic." The words echoed what he'd said yesterday, but hearing them in front of the board made them cut deeper. Lexi looked around the table, seeing doubt crystallize into judgment. "I'm saying we need to be sure we've exhausted every option before we destroy someone's life work." Patricia leaned back, exchanging glances with the other board members. "Let's table the vote for now. Lexi, you have 72 hours to present an alternative that works financially and logistically. If you can't, we proceed with the Roosevelt acquisition as planned, including whatever legal measures are necessary." Richard's voice came through cold and final. "Agreed. Wednesday morning, 9 a.m. No more delays." The meeting dissolved. People gathered papers, made small talk, avoided looking directly at Lexi. Pierce waited until the room cleared before approaching her desk. "What the hell was that? You just made yourself look incompetent in front of the board because you went on one date with the wrong guy." Lexi's hands trembled as she closed her laptop. "I need those 72 hours to find another way." "There is no other way. I've been your CFO for 6 years. I wouldn't have brought this proposal if alternatives existed. You're letting emotions cloud your judgment, and it's going to cost everyone in this building their jobs." He left without waiting for a response. Lexi sat alone in the conference room, staring at the property photos still displayed on the wall. Gray's garage looked small and defiant, surrounded by a newer construction. A stubborn holdout in a neighborhood that had already decided its future. Her phone buzzed. A text from Gray. "How'd it go?" She typed back. "Bought myself 3 days. Need to find a miracle." 3 dots appeared. Then, "Want to talk about it?" Lexi considered. Meeting Gray right now felt dangerous, like diving deeper into a situation that was already drowning her. But she also desperately wanted to see him, to feel less alone in this impossible choice. Her phone rang before she could respond. Marlowe, according to the caller ID. "Ms. Blackwell, we haven't met. I'm Gray's sister. I think we need to have a conversation." Lexi's heart rate spiked. "How did you get my number?" "Gray's phone while he was in the shower. I'm not apologizing for it. Meet me at Intelligentsia Coffee on Randolph in 20 minutes. Come alone." The call ended before Lexi could agree or refuse. She grabbed her coat, already moving toward the elevator, driven by some combination of curiosity and dread. Marlowe sat in the back corner of the coffee shop, wearing nurse's scrubs and an expression that could strip paint. She didn't stand when Lexi arrived, just gestured to the empty chair across from her. "You're prettier than your company headshot." Lexi sat, unsure whether that was a compliment or an insult. "I don't know what Gray told you, but he told me you're the person trying to buy his garage, that you spent Sunday afternoon with Harper, that you've been texting like teenagers despite the fact that you're on opposite sides of a property dispute." Heat crept up Lexi's neck. "It's complicated." "Everything worth having is complicated. I didn't ask you here to yell at you, though I'm tempted. I asked because I need you to understand what you're trying to take." Marlowe pulled out her phone, swiping through photos. She turned the screen toward Lexi. Gray and a dark-haired woman, younger and healthier than the woman Lexi had seen in his apartment photos. "That's Natalie, stage 4 ovarian cancer, diagnosed when Harper was 2. She died at 31 because they couldn't afford experimental treatments their insurance wouldn't cover. Gray sold his truck, his tools, borrowed money from everyone he knew. It wasn't enough." The photos continued. Natalie painting the garage sign. Natalie and Gray at their wedding. Courthouse steps. Both grinning like they'd won the lottery. Natalie holding infant Harper, standing in front of Sullivan's auto repair with pride radiating from every pixel. 2 weeks before she died, she made Gray promise 2 things: keep the garage alive, and find happiness again. In that order. He's been trying to honor both, but the garage is all he has left of her that Harper can touch. You want to take that because it's convenient for your expansion plans. Lexi's throat constricted. "I have 180 employees who'll lose their jobs if we don't expand. People with their own families, their own mortgages, their own Harpers who need stability. Then find another way. You're supposed to be this brilliant CEO. Be brilliant." Marlowe stood, gathering her coat. "One more thing. Gray got a call this morning. Westfield Development offered him $1.2 million for the property. Almost $500,000 more than your company's offer. He told them he needed to think about it." The information hit like a physical blow. "He's considering selling?" "He's considering a lot of things, including whether fighting to keep a building is worth losing a chance at happiness with you. Don't make him choose if you're not willing to choose him back." Marlowe left. Lexi sat alone with her coffee growing cold, staring at the photo Marlowe had pulled up one last time. Natalie's smile, so full of life and dreams, staring at a future she'd never get to see. Back at the office, Lexi spread architectural drawings and zoning maps across her desk. The Roosevelt property took up 15,000 square feet, currently divided between 3 businesses, Sullivan's Auto occupied roughly 6,000 on the ground floor. If they demolished everything, they could build 12,000 square feet of retail space across 3 floors. She pulled up Chicago zoning codes, searching for something she'd missed in 6 months of research. West Loop was designated for mixed-use development as of 2 years ago. That meant commercial and residential could occupy the same structure under certain conditions. Her mind started working through possibilities. What if they didn't demolish the garage? What if they built around it somehow? The lot was larger than standard, room for vertical expansion if the existing structure could support additional floors. Lexi called the architect who'd designed their preliminary plans. Maria Rodriguez answered on the third ring, sounding harried. Lexi, if this is about the Richardson project deadline, I need a favor. Remember when I connected you with the Bergdorf buyer and you said you owed me? Maria's tone shifted to cautious interest. I remember. I need structural analysis and rough design concepts. 6 hours. I'll pay triple your rush rate plus a commission if the project moves forward. 6 hours? Lexi, that's insane. I know, but I also know you can do it. I'm emailing specs now. She hung up and began compiling everything she had on the Roosevelt property. Measurements, photos, existing building permits, weight-bearing capacity of the current structure. By the time she hit send, it was almost 2 p.m. Her phone buzzed. Gray again. Can I see you? I know it's complicated, but I can't stop thinking about you. The honesty of it pierced through her professional armor. She wanted to see him too, desperately, even though every instinct screamed it was a terrible idea. Meet me at your garage. 4 p.m. I might have something to show you. Optimistic, but I'll take it. Lexi worked through the afternoon in a fugue state, running financial projections for scenarios that didn't exist yet. If they kept Sullivan's Auto on the ground floor and built above it, they'd need additional structural support. Steel reinforcement, updated foundation, modifications to meet current building codes. More expensive up front, but potentially cheaper than demolition and ground-up construction. The marketing angle intrigued her too. Blue collar meets high fashion. Authentic Chicago story. A partnership model that prioritized community over displacement. It could work, if Gray agreed, if the numbers penciled out, if the board could see past traditional thinking. Maria emailed at 3:45. Attached were rough 3D renderings showing Sullivan's Auto repair on the ground floor, with 3 stories of retail space rising above it. Preliminary structural notes indicated the existing building could support the additional weight with proper reinforcement. Cost estimates ran higher than their original plan, but not prohibitively so. Timeline stretched from 8 months to 10, still within their deadline if they moved quickly. Lexi grabbed the printouts and drove to West Loop through afternoon traffic. Sullivan's Auto repair looked smaller in person than in photos, tucked between newer construction like a stubborn weed in a manicured garden. The sign was hand-painted, probably by Natalie based on the style. Honest work, fair price. Gray emerged from under a Silverado as she walked in, covered in grease and looking more like himself than he had at dinner. He wiped his hands on a rag that had seen better days. You came. I said I would. They stood awkward in the garage bay, separated by a professional distance that felt wrong after the intimacy of Sunday afternoon. Where's Harper? Marlowe picked her up from school, took her to the Science Museum. Your sister and I met today. She showed me photos of Natalie. Gray's expression closed slightly. She shouldn't have ambushed you. I'm glad she did. I needed to understand what I'm asking you to give up. Lexi pulled the folder from her bag, spreading the renderings on his workbench. Gray moved closer, studying the images with the focus he'd given her alternator. What am I looking at? A different approach. We don't demolish your garage. We build around it. Keep Sullivan's Auto on the ground floor, put Blackwell and Company above it. Partnership model, 50-50 equity split. You contribute the property, I contribute capital and construction costs. We both get what we need." Gray was silent for a long time, fingers tracing the architectural lines. "You're serious about this?" "I presented it to my team this afternoon. Preliminary numbers work. It's more expensive up front, but better long-term ROI. Marketing story writes itself. The board will fight it because it's risky and non-traditional, but I think I can sell them if you're willing." He looked up from the drawings, something raw and vulnerable in his expression. "Why would you do this? Take on more risk, fight your own board, restructure your entire expansion plan." Lexi chose her words carefully, aware they were standing at a crossroads that would determine everything that came after. "Because I refuse to accept that success requires destroying something good. Because you're right that communities need places like this, people who fix things instead of replacing them. And because I'm falling for you, and I don't want the first thing we build together to be on the ruins of your wife's dream." The garage around them smelled like oil and metal and years of labor. Gray set down the rag, closing the distance between them. "I'm terrified of this, of caring about someone again, of risking Harper's heart on something that might not work. I'm terrified too, of failure, of making the wrong choice, of letting down the people who depend on me. But I'd rather fail trying than never try at all." His kiss was careful at first, testing boundaries, then deeper. 4 years of grief and loneliness and fear releasing into something that felt like permission to hope. Lexi's hands found the back of his neck, pulling him closer, aware this was reckless and necessary in equal measure. They broke apart, breathing hard. Gray rested his forehead against hers. "If we do this, I need it to be real. Equal partnership, not charity. I won't be the local business you saved for good PR. Equal partnership, legal contracts, fair terms, proper business structure. I respect you too much to offer anything less." A car pulled into the lot, headlights sweeping across the garage. They separated quickly, suddenly aware of how exposed they'd been. A customer emerged, elderly man with a Buick making concerning noises. Gray shifted seamlessly into work mode, greeting the man with easy professionalism. Lexi watched him diagnose the problem, explain the repair in language the customer could understand, quote a price that was probably lower than market rate. This was what Marlowe had meant. Gray wasn't just running a business, he was serving a community that needed him. The customer left, promising to return in the morning. Gray turned back to Lexi. "I need to talk to Harper about this. She's old enough to have a say in decisions that affect her home." "Of course. Take whatever time you need. Can you stay for dinner? Nothing fancy, just pizza and whatever Harper decides we're watching on Disney+. But I want her to see that you're part of this, that we're figuring it out together." Lexi thought about the work waiting on her desk, the emails accumulating, the pressure of the 72-hour deadline. Then she thought about Harper's drawings, the ease of Sunday afternoon, the possibility of building something that mattered. "I'd like that." Marlowe dropped Harper off at 6, staying just long enough to give Lexi a look that contained equal parts warning and approval. Harper launched herself at Lexi with 6-year-old enthusiasm. "You came back! Daddy said you might." They ordered pizza from Angelo's, the place that had agreed to relocate. Turned out, Angelo's grandson delivered it, a teenager who called Gray by name and refused to take a tip. Small community connections that would disappear if Gray sold to Westfield Development. Over dinner, Gray explained the situation to Harper in terms she could understand. A choice between selling the garage and moving away, or partnering with Lexi's company to build something new while keeping their home. Harper listened with an intensity beyond her years, then looked directly at Lexi. "If we do the partnership, do you promise not to leave like you did on Sunday?" The question cut straight to the fear beneath everything else. Lexi knelt down, eye level with the girl. I left because I was scared and didn't know what to do. But I'm not leaving now. I promise. Harper seemed to weigh this, then nodded. Okay. I want to stay in our home, and I like having you here. After Harper went to bed, Gray and Lexi sat on the couch, close but not touching, aware the easy physicality from the garage had been complicated by the weight of the visions ahead. When do you present to the board? Wednesday morning. I have 48 hours to refine the proposal, run final numbers, prepare for every objection they'll throw at me. What are the odds they approve? Lexi considered lying, then decided honesty served them both better. 50-50. Maybe less. It's riskier than the original plan. Pierce will fight it. My father will question whether I'm thinking clearly. But I'm good at my job, and the numbers support the approach even if the execution is unconventional. Gray's phone rang, interrupting the moment. He glanced at the screen, expression shifting to something complicated. It's Westfield Development, probably following up on their offer. You should answer. He did, putting it on speaker. Marcus Thornton's voice filled the living room with practiced enthusiasm. Mr. Sullivan, I wanted to check in. Have you had time to consider our offer? Gray looked at Lexi as he responded. I appreciate the call, Mr. Thornton, but I'm pursuing a different option. One that lets me keep the garage operational. A pause on the other end, then Thornton's tone sharpened with the edge of someone unused to hearing no. I'm authorized to increase our offer to $1.3 million if the current proposal isn't sufficient. That's $60,000 above market value, Mr. Sullivan. You won't get better. It's not about the money. It's about honoring a promise and building something sustainable. Respectfully, sir, promises don't pay mortgages, and sustainability is a luxury people in your position can rarely afford. I'm giving you 24 hours to reconsider. After that, we move on to other properties. The call ended. Gray set down his phone. That felt good and terrible in equal measure. You turned down $1.3 million. I turned down destroying what Natalie and I built. There's a difference. Lexi leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his shoulder against her cheek. If the board rejects the partnership, I'll resign, start over somewhere else, find funding that doesn't come with strings attached. He pulled back to look at her. You'd give up your company? I'd give up a company built on destroying what matters to you, but I'm not planning to lose. I'm very good at being persuasive when I need to be. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the city sounds filtering through the windows. Finally, Gray spoke, voice rough with emotion. Natalie told me to find happiness again. I thought she meant eventually, someday when enough time had passed, but maybe she meant this. Someone who challenges me, who sees what this place means, who's willing to fight for it alongside me. I'm fighting, and I don't plan to lose. Lexi left around 11, needing to get home and work through the night on the presentation. Gray walked her to her car, kissing her in the parking lot like teenagers despite the December cold. Thank you for seeing a different way forward. Thank you for making me want to find one. The next 48 hours blurred into a caffeinated haze. Lexi worked with Maria to refine the architectural plans, incorporated Pierce's financial projections despite his vocal objections, drafted partnership agreements that protected both parties equally. She called 3 other companies who'd attempted similar mixed-use developments, learning from their successes and failures. Tuesday afternoon, Pierce cornered her in the break room. You're going to sink this company over a mechanic. I'm trying to save this company with an innovative approach that happens to also save a man's livelihood. The board won't buy it. Patricia already called me. She thinks you're emotionally compromised. Lexi poured coffee she didn't need just to have something to do with her hands. Then I'll convince her otherwise. The numbers work, Cameron. This isn't charity. It's smart business disguised as doing the right thing. And if Gray decides partnership is too complicated, if he sells to Westfield instead, then we've wasted 3 days and lost our window. The possibility had been gnawing at Lexi's thoughts. Gray had turned down $1.3 million, but that kind of money could change Harper's entire future. Set up college funds, provide security. Natalie couldn't. He won't sell. He promised. Pierce's expression softened slightly. I hope you're right, because if you're wrong, we all pay the price. A Tuesday evening, Lexi met Sienna for dinner at a place they'd been going since college. Her friend listened to the entire saga without interrupting, nursing a martini and occasionally nodding. When Lexi finished, Sienna set down her glass. You're in love with him. I barely know him. We've spent maybe 10 hours together total. You're restructuring your entire company expansion to protect his garage. That's either love or temporary insanity, and I'm hoping for the former. Lexi picked at her salad, not hungry but needing the appearance of normalcy. Sienna signaled for another drink, studying Lexi with the focus of someone preparing to say something important. Remember 3 years ago? That tech startup you talked me out of investing in? Lexi blinked at the subject change. The AI company that went bankrupt 8 months later? Yes, I remember saving you from losing a small fortune. $200,000 to be precise. Best financial advice anyone ever gave me. Sienna swirled her martini. Been sitting on that money since. Safe, boring, earning minimal interest, waiting for something worth believing in. She looked at Lexi directly. Sometimes the safest investment is the one that might fail, because at least you tried for something that mattered. What if it doesn't work? What if the board rejects the proposal, or the partnership fails, or Gray decides I'm too complicated? Then you tried. That's more than most people do. Most people see an obstacle and quit. You're seeing an obstacle and building something new. The words echoed what Gray had said about fixing things instead of replacing them. Maybe that philosophy extended beyond engines to entire life situations. Wednesday morning arrived with the weight of finality. Lexi dressed in her most expensive suit, armor for the battle ahead. She arrived at the office at 7 to run through the presentation one more time, fixing minor details that probably didn't matter, but gave her hands something to do. Pierce arrived at 8:30, holding a folder. Patricia sent this over. Financial projections based on worst-case scenarios for the partnership model. She's building ammunition to shoot you down. Lexi took the folder, scanning the numbers. Patricia had assumed maximum cost overruns, extended timelines, and immediate partnership dissolution. Under those assumptions, the project lost money. But the assumptions were deliberately pessimistic, designed to make the proposal look reckless. I can counter these. Can you? Because Patricia's right that partnerships between experienced CEOs and single proprietor business owners rarely work. The power imbalance, the different approaches to risk, the conflicting priorities. It's a recipe for disaster, even when personal feelings aren't involved. Lexi looked up from the numbers. You think I'm making a mistake? Pierce sat across from her, the closest thing she had to a friend in this building, besides Sienna. You know what's funny? I've been in finance for 22 years, saved aggressively, invested conservatively, built a portfolio that would make any advisor proud. He tapped the partnership proposal on her desk. But I've never once bet on something that actually matters. Never invested in something I believe in beyond the numbers. Always played it safe. He looked up, met her eyes directly. I think you're gambling on a lot of unknowns, but I also think you're the best CEO I've worked with. And if anyone can make this work, it's you. So I'll support you in the meeting. Just be ready for a fight. Cameron, I appreciate, and if things go sideways and you need capital outside your father's control, he stood, gathering his materials. You know where to find me. The board convened at 9 sharp. Same faces, same room, but the energy felt different, charged with expectation and judgment. Richard Blackwell's video call connected, his expression neutral but his body language suggesting he'd already decided. Lexi stood at the head of the table, pulling up her revised presentation. 72 hours ago, you gave me time to find an alternative to the Roosevelt acquisition. I've found something better. She walked them through the mixed-use concept, showing Maria's refined renderings. Sullivan's auto repair modernized but intact on the ground floor, 3 stories of elegant retail space above. Shared parking structure in back. The Sullivan-Blackwell building, a partnership that honored both legacy and innovation. This isn't cheaper or faster. It's better. Better for community relations. Better for long-term market position. Better as a proof of concept we can replicate in other cities. Patricia interrupted, voice sharp with skepticism. You're proposing we enter a 50-50 partnership with someone who has no corporate experience, no retail background, and every incentive to protect his interests over ours. I'm proposing we partner with someone who's run a successful business for 20 years, who has deep community connections, and who brings authenticity our brand desperately needs. Richard's voice cut through from the speaker. This is about the man. You're making an emotional decision and dressing it up as business strategy. Lexi had expected this. She met her father's eyes through the screen. You're right that I care about Garrett Sullivan. You're wrong that it's clouding my judgment. This partnership works on paper before you add any personal connection. The personal connection just makes me more invested in ensuring it succeeds. She advanced to the next slide, showing financial projections Pierce had helped her refine. Original plan, $4.1 million investment, 8-month timeline, traditional flagship store. Revised plan, $3.8 million investment, 10-month timeline, unique partnership model with expansion potential. We save money up front and create a story that differentiates us in an overcrowded market. Lisa Park, the COO who'd been silent until now, leaned forward. What happens if the partnership dissolves? If Mr. Sullivan decides he doesn't want a fashion company operating above his garage? Partnership agreement includes buyout provisions, decision-making protocols, and dissolution terms that protect both parties. I've had 3 lawyers review the contract. It's airtight. The questions continued for an hour. Pierce supported her with financial data. Patricia attacked from every angle she could find. The other board members weighed both sides carefully. Through it all, Richard watched from his screen, expression unreadable. Finally, Patricia called for a vote. All in favor of the original Roosevelt acquisition plan, proceeding with legal measures as necessary. One hand went up, then another. Patricia's own, 3 votes. All in favor of the partnership approach? Pierce raised his hand immediately. Lisa, after a moment's consideration. 2 votes. Everyone looked at Richard Blackwell. He had the deciding vote, the power to approve or kill the entire project. Lexi held her breath, aware everything she'd built hung on her father's decision. Richard's face on the screen remained impassive. I'm abstaining. But I'm also authorizing Lexi to proceed with the partnership approach on one condition. I take a 10% equity stake as personal investment. Not through the firm, through my personal holdings. That makes me invested in the outcome beyond just board oversight. The room went quiet. Lexi processed what he'd just done, given her the approval she needed while also inserting himself into the project. Control disguised as support or genuine belief in her vision. With Richard, it was always hard to tell. Why? Because you're doing something I never did. Building with people instead of over them. Your mother wanted me to invest in community projects. I told her it wasn't profitable. Turns out she was right, and ye was wrong about a lot of things. Consider this my apology to both of you. The words landed with unexpected weight. Lexi felt her throat constrict. Thank you, Dad. Don't thank me yet. Make it work, Victoria. Prove that doing the right thing and running a successful business aren't mutually exclusive. The meeting adjourned. Patricia left quickly, clearly displeased with the outcome. Pierce lingered behind. You did it. Honestly, didn't think you'd pull it off. I had good numbers. You helped with that. The numbers helped, but you sold them on a vision. That's pure CEO skill. Lexi gathered her materials, hands shaking slightly from adrenaline come down. She needed to tell Gray, needed to see his face when she explained they had a path forward. Pierce's voice stopped her at the door. For what it's worth, I hope he's worth all this. So do I. She drove to Sullivan's Auto, making it there by 11 a.m. The garage door was open, Gray working under an old Honda. She walked in, and he must have sensed her presence because he rolled out from under the car before she said anything. His face was streaked with grease, hair standing up at odd angles, looking nothing like the polished businessman she usually dealt with, looking exactly like the person she wanted to build something with. Well? Lexi couldn't stop the smile from breaking across her face. They approved it. We're partners. Gray stood, crossing the distance in 3 long strides. He picked her up, spinning her once before setting her down and kissing her hard enough that she tasted motor oil and coffee and the specific flavor of relief. You actually did it. We did it. This doesn't work without you agreeing, without Harper being brave enough to stay, without all of us choosing the harder path. Harper appeared from the office upstairs, must have heard the commotion. Does this mean Lexi is staying? Gray knelt down, pulling his daughter close. This means we're all building something together. The garage stays. Lexi's company grows, and we get to figure out what kind of family we might become. Harper looked between them, processing with a child's directness. Like a real family? With you as my mom? The question caught Lexi off guard. She looked at Gray, who nodded slightly, giving her permission to answer honestly. I'd like that very much. If it's okay with you. Harper threw her arms around Lexi's waist, squeezing tight. It's okay. I asked Mommy in my prayers if it was okay, and I think she said yes. Lexi held the girl, aware she was crying and not caring who saw. Gray wrapped his arms around both of them, creating a circle that felt like the beginning of something permanent. Her phone buzzed against her hip, multiple texts coming through. Pierce with legal documents to review, Maria with updated construction timelines, Sienna demanding details. The real work was just beginning, months of construction and negotiation and learning to merge 2 very different business philosophies. But standing in Sullivan's Auto Repair, holding a man she barely knew and his daughter who'd already claimed a piece of her heart, Lexi felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Not success, not achievement, not the satisfaction of closing a deal. Just simple, uncomplicated happiness. The kind that came from choosing people over profit, from building something that mattered more than market share. Gray pressed his forehead against hers. You know we're probably going to fight during this process. Different approaches, different priorities. All the complications Pierce warned about. I know. But I'd rather fight with you than succeed alone. Harper tugged on both their hands. Can we celebrate? With ice cream? They went to the shop 2 blocks over, the kind of local place that survived on neighborhood loyalty rather than Yelp reviews. Harper got chocolate with rainbow sprinkles. Gray ordered black cherry. Lexi tried mint chip and immediately understood why this place had lasted 40 years. Over ice cream, they mapped out the next steps. Contract signing by Friday. Construction permits would take 6 weeks if they moved fast. Gray needed to notify his customers about the upcoming disruption. Lexi needed to coordinate with her retail team on store layout. Harper needed to pick which bedroom she wanted in the apartment they'd build above the garage. It felt real, terrifying and real. Not just a business partnership, but a life partnership. 2 separate worlds trying to merge into something that honored both. That evening, After they'd dropped Harper with Marlowe, Gray and Lexi sat on the garage roof, accessible through a ladder Gray had installed years ago. The Chicago skyline glittered around them, close enough to feel part of it, but distant enough to maintain perspective. "Tell me something true. Something you haven't told anyone else." Gray was quiet for a long moment, then spoke carefully. "I was angry at Natalie for dying. Not at cancer. At her. For leaving me alone with a 2-year-old and a garage I barely knew how to run. For making me promise things I wasn't sure I could keep. I loved her completely, and I was furious at her, and I've never said that out loud because it makes me sound like a terrible person." Lexi took his hand, threading their fingers together. "It makes you sound human. Grief isn't simple. Love isn't simple. You're allowed to hold complicated feelings about complicated situations." "Your turn. Something true." She considered all the truths she could share, settled on the one that felt most relevant. "I built my company to prove my father wrong. Every decision, every risk, every late night was about showing him I didn't need his approval or his money. And now he's investing in our partnership, and part of me is furious because it feels like he's taking credit for something that's mine, even though his support is exactly what we needed. So we're both carrying anger at people we love. Apparently. Good thing we're good at fixing broken things." Gray laughed, the sound carrying across the rooftop. "Life isn't an engine. You can't just replace worn parts and expect it to run smooth. No, but you can reinforce weak structures and build something stronger than the original." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city lights flicker and flow. Tomorrow would bring contracts and complications. Next week would bring construction challenges. Next month would test whether their partnership could survive the stress of actually building together. But tonight, on a garage rooftop in West Loop, two people who'd been alone for too long found something worth fighting for. Not just a business arrangement, not just a romantic connection, but a genuine partnership built on mutual respect, shared values, and the understanding that sometimes the best way forward isn't over or around obstacles, but through them together. Gray's phone buzzed. Marlowe checking in about Harper. Lexi's followed seconds later. Pierce with questions about the partnership agreement. Real life intruding on their rooftop sanctuary. They climbed down the ladder together, Gray going first to catch Lexi if she slipped. At the bottom, she kissed him once more, tasting possibility and promise. "Ready to change everything?" He smiled, and for the first time since Natalie died, the expression reached all the way to his eyes. "With you?" "Absolutely." Construction began the first week of January, 3 weeks after the board approved the partnership. Gray stood in the frozen parking lot behind his garage, watching a crew drive stakes into concrete marked with spray paint. The structural engineer had confirmed what Maria suspected. The building could support 3 additional floors with proper reinforcement, but they'd need to close the garage for 2 weeks while they installed steel beams and updated the foundation. 2 weeks of zero income. Lexi had insisted the partnership would cover lost revenue, but accepting the money felt like proving Pierce right about power imbalances. Gray had argued for taking a loan against future profits. They'd compromised on a draw against his equity stake, structured as a business expense rather than charity. Harper watched from the apartment window above, nose pressed against glass, fascinated by the machinery. She'd taken the news of construction better than Gray expected, mostly because Lexi had promised her input on design elements. Already Harper had sketched ideas for the kids' clothing section, complete with lower display racks and a reading corner. Gray's phone rang. "Marlowe." "How's the first day going?" Loud, invasive. "Exactly like you warned me." "Having second thoughts?" He watched the crew unload steel beams from a flatbed truck, each one representing a future he'd chosen over the safety of Westfield's cash offer. Terrified thoughts, not second ones. Marlowe's voice softened. Natalie would be proud, not just of keeping the garage, but of being brave enough to let someone new in. After they hung up, Gray returned inside to find one of his regulars waiting. Mrs. Patterson, elderly black woman who'd been bringing her Buick here since Gray's father ran the place. She held an envelope. "I heard you were partnering with that fashion company. Wanted to make sure you weren't selling out to some corporation that'll forget we exist." Gray took the envelope, finding a card signed by 30 of his regular customers. "We trust you. Don't let them change what matters." The weight of community expectations settled across his shoulders. These people depended on him maintaining what his father had built. Fair prices, honest work, treating cars like they mattered because to their owners, they did. "Mrs. Patterson, the partnership means I can stay open, keep serving this neighborhood, maybe even expand to offer training programs for kids who need opportunities. The fashion store will be upstairs, separate. Down here, nothing changes except we'll have a better facility." She studied his face, searching for truth. "Your father was a good man. Helped my husband when we couldn't afford repairs, never held it over us. You've been the same way. I'm trusting you'll stay that way even when you're partnered with money." After she left, Gray stared at the card. 30 signatures representing 30 families who'd chosen Sullivan's Auto over chain shops and dealerships, choosing him because his father, and now he, had chosen them. Lexi arrived at noon with sandwiches from the deli Harper liked, finding Gray in the office surrounded by paperwork. Permit applications, insurance updates, vendor contracts for the renovation. The business side he'd always done himself, usually late at night after Harper slept, learning as he went. "You look overwhelmed." "I am overwhelmed. I fix engines. I don't navigate building codes and construction insurance and vendor negotiations." She sat across from him, unwrapping a sandwich. "Then let me handle that part. You focus on keeping your customers happy during the disruption. Division of labor, remember? That's how partnerships work." Gray wanted to argue, to prove he could manage everything independently, but the stack of papers represented dozens of hours he didn't have, and Lexi navigated this world like he navigated engine diagnostics. "Okay, but you explain to me what you're doing so I understand. This is still my building, even if we're sharing it." They spent the next hour going through documents. Lexi translated legal language into plain terms, showed him where to sign, explained what each permit authorized. The process reminded Gray of teaching Harper to read, breaking complex systems into manageable pieces, building understanding through repetition and patience. By the time Harper got home from school, they'd made significant progress. She burst through the door with art supplies and immediate demands. "Lexi, you promised we'd work on designs for the kids section today." Lexi glanced at Gray, checking whether this was okay. He nodded, struck by how naturally she'd integrated into their routines. 3 weeks of dating, and already she knew Harper's after-school schedule. Kept juice boxes Harper liked in her car. Remembered which Disney movies were acceptable for weeknight viewing. While they worked on designs, Gray returned calls to customers explaining the 2-week closure. Most understood. A few grumbled about inconvenience. Mr. Chen, who'd been coming since the 80s, asked the question Gray had been dreading. "You sure this is a good idea, Gray? Partnering with corporate money? They'll push you out eventually, take over completely." "It's not like that. Contracts protect both sides. And Lexi's not some faceless corporation. She's—" He trailed off, unsure how to finish. What was Lexi exactly? His business partner, certainly. His girlfriend, though that word felt inadequate for the complexity of their connection. Harper's almost mother figure. The person who'd restructured her entire expansion plan rather than destroy what mattered to him. "She's someone I trust." Mr. Chen grunted, unconvinced but willing to wait and see. The call left Gray unsettled. How many others were questioning his judgment? How many thought he'd been seduced by a pretty face into surrendering what his father built? That evening, after Harper went to bed, Gray found Lexi reviewing construction timelines on her laptop. She'd changed into comfortable clothes, hair pulled back, looking less like a CEO and more like someone who belonged in his life. "We have a problem." She looked up, immediately alert. "What kind of problem?" "Some of my customers are worried. They think you'll eventually push me out, turn this into just another corporate location." Lexi closed her laptop, giving him full attention. "What do you think?" "I think contracts and good intentions don't always survive reality. I think power imbalances exist whether we acknowledge them or not. I think my customers' concerns aren't unreasonable." She was quiet for a moment, processing. "You're right, which is why we need more than contracts. We need transparency. Monthly community meetings where we share decisions, listen to concerns, show this partnership serves everyone, not just us." "That'll take time. Add complexity to decision-making." "Anything worth building takes time and complexity. You taught me that when you explained why you spent 3 hours diagnosing a problem instead of just replacing parts." Gray felt tension ease slightly. This was why the partnership might work. Lexi didn't dismiss concerns or offer easy platitudes. She engaged with reality, adjusted course, built solutions from problems. "Okay, monthly meetings. Starting now, before construction disrupts everything. Show people we're listening." They held the first community meeting the following Saturday in the garage bay, chairs borrowed from the church 2 blocks over. 40 people showed up, more than Gray expected, his regular customers plus neighbors curious about the changes coming to their block. Lexi presented the plans with the polish of someone used to corporate presentations, but she'd adapted her language, stripping away jargon and focusing on practical impacts. 3 stories of retail space above the garage. Job opportunities for local residents. Partnership model that kept Sullivan family ownership intact. Questions came fast. Would prices increase? Would Gray's attention shift away from the garage? What guarantee did they have this wouldn't become another gentrification story? Gray fielded the mechanical questions. Yes, his prices would stay consistent. No, his focus remained on the garage. Lexi's team would handle retail operations independently. They'd built separate management structures specifically to prevent conflicts. Lexi addressed the broader concerns with honesty that surprised several attendees. "I can't guarantee this won't contribute to neighborhood changes. Investment attracts more investment. Property values will likely increase. Some of you might see that as positive. Others might worry about displacement. What I can guarantee is our partnership prioritizes community benefit over maximum profit. We're building something sustainable, not extracting value and leaving." Mrs. Patterson stood, commanding attention despite her small frame. "Gray's father helped this community for 40 years. Gray's done the same. You're asking us to trust you'll honor that legacy while also making money off this neighborhood." "Yes, ma'am, that's exactly what I'm asking. And I'm asking you to hold us accountable. Monthly meetings like this one. Transparent reporting on hiring, pricing, business practices. You don't have to trust blindly. Make us earn it continuously." The meeting ran 2 hours. By the end, skepticism hadn't vanished but had shifted to cautious willingness to watch and judge based on actions. Several attendees approached Gray afterward, expressing appreciation that he'd listened rather than dismissing their concerns. Walking Lexi to her car, Gray felt the weight of doubled responsibility. Not just keeping the garage running, but proving the partnership model could work without betraying community trust. "You were good in there. Better than good." Lexi leaned against her Mercedes, exhausted but satisfied. "I meant what I said. About transparency and accountability. We're not just building a business. We're building a model that other communities could use. That matters more than profit margins." He kissed her then, in the parking lot where 40 people could see, making a statement about commitment that went beyond contracts. February brought the complication Maria had warned about in December, but everyone had hoped wouldn't materialize. The initial structural inspection had flagged potential foundation concerns, water intrusion common in century-old Chicago buildings. The question had been severity. They got their answer when excavation began for the steel beam installation. What surface inspection suggested might need minor patching revealed itself as significant compromise to load-bearing capacity. Decades of freeze-thaw cycles had done worse damage than anyone could see without digging down to the actual foundation. The engineer's updated assessment was blunt: fix it properly or risk catastrophic failure when they added weight above. No half measures, no hoping for the best. Cost: $180,000 more than budgeted. Timeline: 6 additional weeks. Gray sat in Lexi's office, staring at revised projections that made his head spin. The partnership agreement allocated budget overruns proportionally, meaning he owed $90,000 he absolutely didn't have. "I can take a loan. Use the building as collateral." Lexi shook her head. "That defeats the purpose of partnership. We're in this together, which means shared risks." Gray stood, pacing her office. "You knew this could happen. Maria flagged it in December." "We knew it was possible. Hoped we'd get lucky with minimal damage." Lexi pulled up the original inspection report on her screen. "Engineer gave us 3 scenarios. Best case, $50,000 in repairs. Most likely, $90,000. Worst case, $200,000. We budgeted for most likely, got worse than worst case. We gambled. I gambled. I made the call to move forward without drilling core samples to verify foundation condition. That would have cost $20,000 and delayed permits another month. I decided it was acceptable risk." She met his eyes directly. "I was wrong. This overrun is on me." Gray stopped pacing, recognizing the weight of her admission. "We're partners. Means we share mistakes too. I won't let you subsidize my half. That makes this charity, not partnership." They'd been arguing in circles for an hour, neither willing to compromise on principles that felt essential to maintaining equal footing. Pierce knocked on the open door, stepping in without invitation. "I have a solution you're both going to hate." Richard Blackwell offered to cover the overrun as an increased equity investment. 20% total stake instead of 10. You both keep your 40% shares, we cover costs without debt. Gray's stomach turned. More Blackwell money meant more Blackwell control, exactly what his customers feared. "No. We find another way." Lexi looked torn between relief and frustration. "Gray, we don't have another way. Not without delays that'll cost us the spring opening date. Miss that and we're into summer, which means missing our highest revenue season. Then we delay, take the hit, but we don't hand your father more control because we hit an obstacle. It's not control, it's investment. He's literally giving us money to solve a problem. Money is always control. Your father knows that better than anyone." The argument was really about deeper fears. Gray worried about being pushed out eventually, becoming a minority voice in what had been his family's business. Lexi worried about failure, about proving her father right that she couldn't manage complex partnerships without his intervention. Pierce interrupted their stalemate. "There's a third option. I have personal savings. $200,000 I've been sitting on, waiting for the right investment opportunity. I'll cover the overrun in exchange for a 5% equity stake. That leaves you both at 47.5%, with Richard at 5% and me at 5%. Gray studied Pierce, searching for angles. "Why would you do that?" "Because I've worked with Lexi for 6 years and this is the most innovative thing she's attempted. Because I believe the model has potential beyond this single location, and because, frankly, I'm tired of Richard Blackwell's money being the solution to every problem." Lexi looked equally surprised. "Cameron, you don't have to do this." "I know, but I want to. You've built something worth investing in, and I'm betting it succeeds." They revised the partnership agreements, adding Pierce as a minor stakeholder. Richard wasn't pleased about reduced influence, but accepted the restructure with surprising grace. The foundation repairs began immediately, pushing their timeline into late April, but keeping the project viable. That evening, Gray picked Harper up from art class to find her unusually quiet. They drove home in silence before she finally spoke. Emma said her dad thinks you're stupid for partnering with Lexi, that she'll take the garage and you'll have nothing. The casual cruelty of 7-year-old social dynamics. Gray pulled into their parking spot, engine idling. Emma's dad is scared. Change is scary, especially when you don't understand it. But sweetheart, sometimes you have to risk things to build something better. But what if he's right? What if Lexi leaves like Mommy did? The comparison hit hard. Harper had been 3 when Natalie died, barely old enough to remember details but old enough to internalize abandonment. Now at 7, she was attaching to Lexi while simultaneously terrified of losing another mother figure. Mommy didn't choose to leave. Cancer took her from us. Lexi chooses to be here every day. That's different. But she could choose to leave. She could. And that's scary. But love always involves risk, Harper. We risk getting hurt because the alternative, staying alone and safe, means missing out on connection and joy. Harper processed this with characteristic seriousness. Do you love Lexi? Gray realized he hadn't actually said the words out loud, not to Lexi and definitely not to Harper. But sitting in his truck with his daughter, the truth felt unavoidable. I do. I love her. Does she love you? I think so, but you'd have to ask her. Later that night, while Lexi helped with Harper's homework, the girl looked up suddenly. Daddy says he loves you. Do you love him? Lexi's eyes found Gray across the room. He shrugged, apologetic and amused. She turned back to Harper, speaking carefully. I do love him. And I love you too. Is that okay? Harper considered, then nodded. It's okay. But you have to promise not to die like Mommy. The impossible request of a child who'd lost too much already. Lexi pulled Harper into her lap. I can't promise I won't ever die. Nobody can promise that, but I promise I'll try very hard to stick around for a very long time. And I promise that choosing to be in your life is the best decision I've ever made. Gray watched them, these 2 people who'd become his entire world in the space of 3 months, and felt something shift permanently in his chest. This wasn't temporary, wasn't a transition phase or a rebound relationship. This was building a family from broken pieces, creating something whole from individual damage. Late February, Richard Blackwell called Lexi's cell directly instead of routing through Pierce. Unusual enough that she stepped out of a design review meeting to answer, snow falling outside the construction trailer. Dad? Is everything okay? His voice sounded different through the line. Less boardroom command, more human uncertainty. I've been thinking about the foundation crisis, the cost overrun, Pierce's investment. Lexi braced for criticism about losing control, about letting her CFO bail out a project she'd mismanaged. We're handling it. The repairs are on schedule. Equity restructure is finalized. That's not why I'm calling. Silence stretched between them. Lexi heard Richard take a breath, the kind that preceded difficult admissions. When your mother was sick, the last year before she died, she asked me to promise something. His voice roughened slightly. She wanted me to invest in community projects after she was gone, support local businesses, build things that mattered to actual people, not just portfolios and quarterly returns. Lexi's grip tightened on her phone. She'd been 14 when her mother died, hadn't known about any deathbed promises. You never told me that. I didn't keep the promise. Told myself it wasn't practical, that sentiment doesn't scale, that I needed to focus on growing the firm. A pause. Chicago wind rattled the construction trailer. I convinced myself I was honoring her by being successful. Turns out success without meaning was exactly what she warned me against. Lexi found herself leaning against the trailer wall, eyes burning. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I watched your board presentation, not just the day of, but 12 times since then. Watched you defend a partnership that makes less financial sense, but more human sense. Watched you choose a harder path because it was the right path, even knowing it might cost you everything." He cleared his throat. "Your mother would have been proud. I should have said that in the meeting. Should have said it years ago when you started your company without my money, proving I was wrong about you. I'm saying it now because I'm tired of being the father who's too proud to admit when his daughter is better at living than he ever was." Lexi was fully crying now, not caring if anyone in the trailer heard. "Dad, I'm flying in next week. Want to meet this mechanic you've been building a life with. And I want to do it as your father who's proud of you, not as an investor questioning your judgment." After the call ended, Lexi stood in the freezing construction trailer, surrounded by blueprints of the building she and Gray were creating, and felt something fundamental shift. Not just in the business partnership, but in the father-daughter relationship she'd thought was permanently calcified into mutual disappointment. Maybe fixing broken things applied to more than engines and businesses. Maybe it applied to families, too. She texted Gray. "My father just called. Actually talked to me like a human. I think he's trying." Gray's response came immediately. "That's good. People can change if they want to badly enough. Look at us." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, "He wants to meet you. Properly. As my father, not as an investor." Gray sent back a single word. "Terrifying." Then, "But yeah, let's do it. Let's." March brought warmer weather and the beginning of visible progress. Steel beams rose above the garage, skeletal structure that would eventually support 3 floors. The construction crew worked efficiently, ahead of schedule now that foundation issues were resolved. Gray reopened the garage, word spreading quickly that Sullivan's Auto was back in business. His first day saw 12 cars, customers who'd waited rather than going elsewhere. Mrs. Patterson brought her Buick and homemade cookies, her way of saying she'd been right to trust him. Between oil changes and brake jobs, Gray watched Lexi coordinate with contractors, reviewing every detail with the precision she brought to fashion design. She'd changed in subtle ways over 3 months, less severe in her appearance, trading corporate armor for professional clothes that allowed personality to show through, more willing to delegate, trusting her team instead of micromanaging every decision. They fell into rhythms, too. Sunday mornings were for farmers market and Harper's art class. Wednesday evenings, Lexi cooked dinner, experimenting with recipes while Harper did homework at the kitchen table. Saturdays varied, sometimes construction site visits, sometimes movies, sometimes just existing together without agenda. The first real fight came in April, triggered by something minor that exposed deeper tensions. Lexi had hired a PR firm to manage media around the partnership's opening, wanting to control narrative and maximize positive press. Gray found out when a journalist called asking for an interview about the innovative business model. He confronted her that evening, Harper at Marlowe's, for a sleepover. "You hired PR without discussing it?" "It's standard for any major retail opening. I didn't think it needed partnership approval." "Everything about how we present this partnership needs discussion. You're treating me like an employee again." Lexi's expression hardened, defenses rising. "I'm treating this like a business that needs proper marketing. You can't run everything through committee meetings. Sometimes decisions have to happen quickly. Then establish guidelines for what needs discussion versus what doesn't. Don't just decide unilaterally, then tell me after the fact." They argued for an hour, voices rising as frustration compounded. Finally, Lexi threw up her hands. You know what? Maybe Pierce was right. Maybe partnerships between experienced CEOs and single-owner operators don't work. Maybe we're fundamentally incompatible in how we approach business. The words hung between them, dangerous in their finality. Gray felt anger give way to something colder. Is that what you really think? That I'm too small-time to be your equal partner? That's not what I meant, but it's what you said. And maybe it's what you've thought all along. The mechanic playing at business while you do the real work. Gray, that's not fair, isn't it? You just admitted you make decisions without me because consulting would slow things down. That's not partnership. That's you tolerating my involvement while running things your way. Lexi's phone rang, Pierce's name flashing. She ignored it, focusing on Gray with intensity that felt both desperate and determined. You're right. I defaulted to old patterns because that's how I've operated for 10 years. But I don't think you're small-time. I think you're brilliant at what you do. And I'm still learning how to share control with someone I respect as much as you. The admission softened Gray's anger slightly. We need better communication structures. Weekly partnership meetings where we go through upcoming decisions together. Clear delineation of who handles what independently versus what requires joint approval. Agreed. And I'll cancel the PR firm's engagement until we discuss messaging strategy together. No, keep them. But next time, talk to me first. They salvaged the evening, establishing protocols that should have existed from the start. The fight revealed fragility in their partnership, places where assumptions had substituted for actual agreement. But working through conflict instead of avoiding it felt like progress. Late April arrived with the building substantially complete. Exterior finished, interior framed out and ready for specialized work. Lexi's retail team began installing fixtures on floors 2 through 4, while Gray focused on modernizing the garage's equipment. New lifts, updated diagnostic computers, a customer waiting area that didn't look like it belonged in 1987. Harper had become fascinated with the construction process, spending hours watching electricians wire retail lighting and plumbers install bathroom fixtures. She'd incorporated architectural elements into her fashion sketches, designing clothes that somehow referenced the building's structural bones. One evening, while they toured the nearly complete retail space, Harper asked the question Gray had been avoiding. When the store opens, will you and Lexi get married? Lexi fumbled the paint sample she'd been examining. Gray felt his pulse spike. That's a big question, sweetheart. Emma's dad said you're already acting married, living together and running a business and stuff. They weren't actually living together, though the line had blurred. Lexi stayed over most nights, keeping clothes in Gray's closet and toiletries in the bathroom. They ate meals together, made decisions jointly, co-parented Harper in ways that looked indistinguishable from marriage. Marriage is complicated, Harper. It's not just about spending time together. Harper looked between them with 7-year-old bluntness. But do you want to marry each other? Gray met Lexi's eyes, seeing his own uncertainty reflected back. They'd been moving fast, driven by necessity and intensity, but actual marriage, legal and permanent, felt both inevitable and terrifying. Yes, eventually, when we're sure the timing's right. Harper seemed satisfied with this answer. Lexi stayed quiet until they'd tucked Harper into bed, then cornered Gray in the kitchen. Did you mean that? About marriage? Did you want me to lie to my daughter? I want to know if you meant it. Gray pulled her close, feeling the familiar fit of her body against his. I meant it. Terrifies me, but I meant it. You're it for me, Lexi. The partnership works because we work, and I want to make that permanent, legally and emotionally. But not yet. Not until we've proven to ourselves that we can navigate the hard parts without falling apart. She rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. I want that too, the permanent part. But you're right that timing matters. Let's get through the opening. Establish that the business model functions. Show my father and your customers and everyone watching that we didn't crash and burn. Then we'll talk about forever. The grand opening was scheduled for the first weekend of May. Lexi's team worked 18-hour days perfecting merchandising, ensuring every detail matched her vision. Gray hired 2 additional mechanics to handle anticipated volume increases, training them according to his father's standards. Publicity built steadily. Local papers ran stories about the innovative partnership. Business journals analyzed the model's potential for replication. Fashion bloggers praised Lexi's commitment to community-centered retail. Gray gave interviews describing his father's legacy and how the partnership honored rather than replaced what had been built. 3 days before opening, Richard Blackwell flew in from San Francisco. Gray had spoken with him only twice since the equity negotiations, but the phone call in February had shifted something fundamental. In person, Richard carried the same authority that had built a venture capital empire, but the cracks in the armor were wider now, more intentional, like someone learning to be vulnerable on purpose. They met for dinner at a steakhouse Richard chose, expensive enough that Gray felt uncomfortable ordering. Lexi sat between them, clearly nervous about facilitating this conversation. Richard ordered bourbon, studying Gray with assessment that felt both professional and personal. My daughter tells me you've been good for her. Challenged her assumptions, forced her to think beyond quarterly projections. She's been good for me too. Helped me see that protecting legacy doesn't mean refusing evolution. You turned down $1.3 million to stay in a garage. That takes either conviction or stupidity. I'm curious which. Gray met the older man's gaze without flinching. Conviction. Money solves certain problems, but it can't buy what your daughter and I are building. Connection, community, meaning. The things my father valued more than profit margins. Richard took a long drink, expression unreadable. My wife wanted me to invest in community projects, support local businesses, create partnerships instead of just extracting value. I told her it wasn't profitable, that sentiment had no place in serious investing. Then she died, and I kept making money while losing what actually mattered. The admission hung heavy. Lexi reached for her father's hand. Dad, you don't have to. I do. Your mother was right and I was wrong about almost everything. This partnership you've built, it's what she wanted me to do. Invest in people, not just properties. Build alongside communities instead of over them. He turned to Gray. So I'm apologizing. To you, because I nearly convinced my daughter to demolish your garage for standard retail expansion. To Victoria, because I undermined her vision with my doubts. And to my late wife, because I'm finally learning lessons she tried teaching 30 years ago. The meal continued with surprising ease. Richard asked intelligent questions about automotive repair, listened to Gray's explanations with genuine interest. He and Lexi talked about the company's expansion plans, discussing strategy with the fluency of people who shared professional language. Walking Lexi to her car afterward, Gray felt something settle. Your father's complicated. He's trying. That's more than I expected. Think he'll actually stay invested without trying to control everything? Honestly, I don't know. But I think he genuinely wants this to succeed on our terms, not his. Opening day arrived with perfect spring weather. Crowds started gathering at 9 for the 11 a.m. ceremony. Media crews set up equipment. Local politicians arrived for photo opportunities. Gray's regular customers mixed with fashion enthusiasts, creating unexpected conversations between worlds that rarely intersected. Harper wore a dress she'd designed with Lexi's guidance, purple fabric with silver accents that caught the sunlight. She stood between Gray and Lexi, holding both their hands, looking older than 7 and impossibly proud. The ribbon cutting went smoothly. Gray cut the garage entrance ribbon, Lexi handled the retail entrance. Harper got her own ribbon for the kids' section entrance, beaming as cameras flashed. Inside, the spaces exceeded Gray's visualization. The garage gleamed with new equipment but maintained character, honoring his father's aesthetic while embracing modern functionality. Upstairs, Blackwell and Company displayed merchandise with artistic precision, creating an environment that felt both accessible and aspirational. Harper's kids section occupied a corner of the second floor, designed at child height with reading nooks and dress-up areas. Her fashion sketches decorated one wall, framed professionally with placards explaining the designer's age and inspiration. The day blurred past in continuous motion. Customers for the garage, shoppers in the retail space, journalists wanting interviews, community members offering congratulations. By evening, Gray's feet ached and his voice had gone hoarse, but satisfaction outweighed exhaustion. They closed at 8, finally alone in the building they'd created together. Harper had gone home with Marlo, giving them space to decompress. They walked through empty retail floors, checking details, absorbing what they'd accomplished. "We did it." Lexi leaned against a display rack, shoes off, looking beautifully exhausted. "We did, and it's terrifying how much work is ahead. Also terrifying how right this feels. The partnership, the building, us." She crossed to him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "I need to tell you something. Been waiting for the right moment, and I think this is it." Gray's heart rate increased. "That sounds ominous." "Not ominous, just important. I love you." Said it to Harper, but never directly to you. So I'm saying it now, after we've built something real together. I love you, Garrett Sullivan. Your stubborn conviction, your loyalty to community, the way you love your daughter fiercely while teaching her to be brave. I love all of it. He kissed her, tasting the future in the present moment. I love you too. Have loved you since you sat on my living room floor teaching Harper about draping techniques. Maybe before that, when you didn't flinch from her mentioning Natalie, you see the whole complicated mess of who we are and choose us anyway. They stood in their empty building, surrounded by the physical manifestation of choosing each other repeatedly across months of challenges. Not perfect, not without continuing risks, but real in ways that mattered more than security. They stood in their empty building, surrounded by the physical manifestation of choosing each other repeatedly across months of challenges. Not perfect, not without continuing risks, but real in ways that mattered more than security. Lexi's phone buzzed. Pierce with final sales numbers from opening day. Gray's followed with a text from Marlo asking how it went. Real life waiting to pull them back into logistics and responsibilities. But for now, they stayed in the quiet building, holding each other, feeling the weight and wonder of what they'd built together. This is just the beginning, isn't it? Gray kissed her forehead. The best beginnings always are. 6 weeks later, Gray stood on the garage rooftop at sunset, the same place where he and Lexi had first talked about fixing broken things instead of replacing them. Below, the Sullivan Blackwell building hummed with evening activity, his garage closing for the day, her retail space still lit with late shoppers, both thriving beyond anyone's projections. Harper sat beside him on the roof ledge, legs swinging, holding a small velvet box like it contained the universe. You're really nervous, Daddy. Your hands are shaking. Gray looked at his daughter, who'd spent last Saturday helping him pick the ring. Simple platinum band with a small diamond set flush to avoid catching on fabric. Elegant without being ostentatious. Very Lexi. What if she says no? Harper rolled her eyes with 7-year-old exasperation. She's not going to say no. She already said yes, remember? At the opening? You're just making it official now. That was different. That was theoretical future. Yes, this is actual present tense proposal. You're overthinking it. Gray had to laugh. His daughter sounded exactly like Marlo. The rooftop door opened. Lexi emerged, still in work clothes, probably reviewing inventory reports until Harper's text claimed emergency fashion crisis upstairs. Harper said you needed... She stopped, seeing Gray standing there in the blue shirt from their first date, seeing Harper holding a ring box, grinning like she'd won the lottery. Seeing the rooftop scattered with small candles in glass holders, protection against the June wind. Oh my God. Gray crossed to her, took both her hands in his. They were trembling slightly, matching his own. 6 months ago, you were a stranger whose car broke down in a snowstorm. 4 months ago, we became business partners against every reasonable person's advice. 2 months ago, we opened this building together and proved the reasonable people wrong. He paused, looking at her face in the sunset light, memorizing this moment. And somewhere in all of that chaos and construction and fighting about permits, you became my person. The person I want to fix broken things with for the rest of my life. The person Harper asks for when she has nightmares. The person who sees everything I am. Mechanic, father, man still grieving someone I lost, and chooses me anyway. He took the box from Harper, opened it. The diamond caught the dying light. Alexandra Blackwell, will you marry me? For real this time, with a ring and witnesses, and Harper practically vibrating with excitement behind me. Lexi was crying, nodding before he finished the question. Yes, yes, absolutely yes. Harper cheered, launched herself between them as Gray slid the ring onto Lexi's finger. It fit perfectly. They stood there, the three of them forming a circle on a rooftop in West Loop, building a family from broken pieces and brave choices. Below, Chicago moved forward with relentless indifference. Cars honked. Trains rattled past. The city that had watched them crash together and choose each other kept spinning toward whatever came next. But up here, two people who'd found each other by accident and chosen each other on purpose every day since, held on to something that felt permanent. Not perfect, never perfect, but real in ways that mattered more than easy. Harper tugged both their hands. Can we go tell Aunt Marlowe now? She's waiting downstairs. She helped Daddy plan this whole thing. Lexi laughed through tears. She knew? Everyone knew, Gray admitted. Pierce helped me figure out financing for the ring. Maria convinced you to stay late reviewing inventory. Mrs. Patterson is watching through her car window in the parking lot because she wanted to see you say yes. You conspirators. We prefer collaborative partnership. You taught me that. They climbed down from the roof together, Gray going first, Lexi following, Harper scrambling after with the empty ring box clutched like treasure. At the bottom, Marlowe waited with champagne and sparkling cider, Pierce with his phone ready to take photos, Mrs. Patterson with tears streaming down her face. A small celebration in a garage that smelled like motor oil and new beginnings, surrounded by people who'd watched them build something worth keeping. Outside, the Sullivan Blackwell building stood against the Chicago skyline, lights glowing warm in the summer evening. A partnership that worked because both people had chosen the harder path, the honest path, the path that honored what came before while building toward what came next. And inside, three people who'd found each other through broken alternators and impossible choices became a family not by accident, but by choice. The kind of choice that gets made new every morning, tested by reality, and strengthened by commitment. The best kind of choice. The only kind that lasts.